Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Michael from Gsheets, and today I want to show you how to build a sales funnel dashboard for a sales team using Google Sheets and Google Forms. Now, every business has a series of steps or stages that a customer has to go through in order for a sale to close, and this is referred to as a sales funnel. And it's really important to understand the performance of your sales funnel so you can see where your customers are dropping off. You want to know where your conversion rates are, etc. Now, if you have a sales team, it becomes more important because you want to know how each salesperson is doing so you can help to either increase their sales or have some measure of accountability, right? So what this dashboard does is, what this video does is it shows you how to create a process using Google Forms to collect data from the sales reps, and then in Google Sheets, how to build this really simple but effective dashboard that will automatically update as data is sent through the Google Sheets. So the first thing I want to do is I want to give a dashboard overview, basically show you the features. Then I'll show you how to create the Google form, and then I'll show you how to build the dashboard using mainly the query formula. The query formula is, if you guys watch my other videos, it's something that I use to create almost all of my dashboards when creating dashboards inside of Google Sheets, and it's just overall a really great formula to know if you want to get good at Google Sheets. So I'm using this dashboard to kind of teach you how to use that formula, right? But there's also a lot of important data structure things in this video that you'll learn if you follow along. So like I mentioned, the way that this works is you send out a Google Forms link to all of your sales rep, and then every single day they're going to report on how many of each stage of their sales funnel that they've completed, right? So they're kind of self-reporting, but it's better than nothing in my opinion. So this way you can at least have some sort of measurable KPI for them to hit or something like that. So the form will look something like this, where they'll have a date, they'll enter in their location. If there's different departments in your sales team, they'll put in their name and they put in the number of each metric, right? And the example that I'm using here is a solar and roofing company. So what they do is they have a group of salespeople that go out and physically knock on doors to try and get these customers in their houses to basically pay for their roofing services. So the way that their sales funnel works is it starts with a physical door knock, it turns into a pitch, which may turn into a lead, which then turns into an inspection, then to a proposal, and then finally to a closed contract. Now, your sales funnel is probably going to look a bit different depending on what business you're in. A popular funnel might be like a form submitted, a phone call, and then a closed sale, right? So it doesn't really matter. You can just substitute however you want, but this is the example that I'll be using for this dashboard. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is go over the features of this dashboard. Up top, we have 4 different filters. We have a date range selection filter, a location, department, and a sales rep filter. So here we can change the date range, and whatever we change it to, the entire dashboard is going to update to include that date range. Most of the time my clients want a week over week dashboard, so they'll look at this from the previous Monday to Sunday so they can compare it against the prior 7 days, right? And then here this company has multiple locations, so let's say they only want to see one location, which is Austin. They can look at it that way. They can also look at either their roofing or their solar department separately, like this. I believe Austin only probably has, so they only have a roofing department. And then in this case, you can also select a just single sales rep. So let's say Harry Potter, and you can see how they're doing. And the cool thing is if you delete this, it's going to show all, right? Which is a nice convenient feature. The next thing we have here are scorecards. It's just going to show the number of raw numbers that are reported by the sales reps for each sales funnel stage, and then it's going to have a comparison here against the previous period. So depending on whichever date range you select, so let's say you select the last 7 days, it's going to compare it against the previous 7 days. And here it's going to show green if it's a positive gain, positive change, and then here it's going to show red if it's a negative change. So basically there are 30% less proposals over this date range than the date range prior to it. Now we have some charts and tables. This chart basically shows your sales funnel stages to get a better visual of what is going on down the funnel. Here are your sales conversion metrics. So from each stage to stage, what percent of customers are continuing on to the next stage. So here from knocks to pitches, you'll see that it's about 20% of all knocks turn into pitches. Pitches to lead is also around 20%. From your leads to inspections, about 60% of your leads turn into inspections, and so forth, right? So one actionable item you can take by looking at this funnel conversion chart is that you notice that you have a very high number of leads to inspections, right? So basically from this step to this step has a 60% chance of continuing on. So you can look at this and say, okay, you know what, if I increase my number of leads, that's what I should focus on, right? And to increase the number of leads, you probably just need to focus on the step before, which are your pitches. So in this case, you might want to think, okay, if I can focus on the quality of my pitches, maybe perhaps changing the scripts that your sales team uses or something, that's where the problem point is. That's where the most of the drop off, as you can see, is coming, right? Is from pitches to leads. So you can focus on that and shore up your funnel. So that's an example of an action item you can take by looking at analysis in this way with this type of a dashboard. Moving on, we have our contracts leaderboard. So this just shows the number of total contracts closed by each sales rep. This is a top 10 for that particular date range, just so you can kind of see who's performing the best and maybe have some sort of competitive factor to this dashboard, right? Moving on, we have a table here. This basically just shows both of these charts here in a table format, so you can just see the raw numbers. We have versus the previous step, which is this, versus the initial step, which is the doors knocks. So you know that 0.3% of doors knocked turn into a contract, 1% of doors knocked turn into proposals. And then this is a spark line chart showing the lower funnel, so just showing from leads on down, just to get a better visual perspective of how it's going. Because this one, it's a bit skewed because the number of knocks is so high compared to the number of contracts. I go in a little bit detail of how we can adjust this using a log scale for this chart, but that'll be later in the video. Here we have a current versus previous period. It just shows the current number of knocks within this date range versus the previous number. I probably won't show you guys how to build this one. It's a little bit complicated, but I will in a future or one of my advanced courses. Down here we have a couple of tables which basically just show this number, but for each of for all sales reps, right? Just so you can kind of see. And then the darker the green is a higher the number, darker the red is the lowest number, and then the same thing for conversion metrics. And then now we have a wins and challenges tab. So one of the questions that's being asked on this form is, what are your wins for that day and what are your challenges for that day? This might help give you a bit more context to the numbers that you're seeing, right? So let's say you look at one particular rep over one period of time here, and you see these numbers and okay, they're down a lot. So you can look to the wins and challenges, which will automatically update depending on what filters you selected on the previous tab, and you can kind of see kind of some explanations as to what is going on, right? This might give you a bit more context to just kind of help you analyze your sales team more than just looking at just your KPIs or the numbers, right? So for example, if someone put struggling with my mental health on this date, you can add in a date column too. You might kind of want to talk to them and just understand what's going on a little bit better and see how you can help your sales team perform the best. Okay, so now that we've gone through this sales dashboard overview, I want to show you guys how to create a Google form. The final form will look like this. If you already know how to create a Google form and how to connect it to a sheet, then you can skip this part. I'm going to go through at the very end of this chapter just how to work with Google Forms data, because it's a little tricky with the way that it comes into the Google Sheet, right? Okay, so what you want to do is just go to your Google Drive, hit New, and then go to Google Forms. And this is where you want to determine what questions you want to ask for your dashboard, right? And to determine this, you want to identify the stages that you want to track in your sales funnel. In order to do this, what you want to do is think about the stages that are significant in your process and that you can reasonably ask your sales reps to count and track for each day, right? So obviously there are probably minor steps in between these 6 stages, but you don't want them to over track, right? So you just want to choose the most important ones to your sales funnel. Once you've determined that, the next thing you want to determine is how granular you want to track your data. So in this company's case, we have location, department, and sales rep, right? This means that I can look at all of these numbers at a location level because I'm asking this in my Google form, right? I'm asking them to select a location. If you don't, then you can't report on that level. You can only report on a sales rep level. This company is going further. They have 2 divisions, a department and solar. So one sales rep can have solar numbers and roofing numbers, right? So maybe you don't want to get that granular, maybe you do. So once you determine that, it might be good to map it out on like a schema planner, like on a Google Sheet. So no matter what, you're always going to have a date, right? Whenever collecting data, you always want to have a date. So let's put in date as the first column. And then we are going to have the next question, or it's basically a column. Location, department, let me zoom in a bit, and then sales rep. So these are all of your fields in blue, right? I'll put this in the lighter blue. Now you want to start tracking your metrics, which would be, let's see, knocks. Oh, sorry, this is called sales rep. And then now you're gonna have knocks, pitches, leads, inspections, proposals, and then contracts. And then you also want to ask, the wins and challenges, right? So this is essentially going to be the structure of your Google form. So if you look at it here, these are your metrics, and then this is just a couple of other. So these are your fields, and these are your metrics, and then these are just kind of like some text answers, right? And you might want to put the type of data type it is. So in this case, it's going to be a whole number. All of these will be whole numbers. So, whoops. And then this will be text, long text, long text. You don't have to do this part, but this just helps me. So this is going to be a date. This will be a drop down. These will all be drop downs because you want them to select from a drop down menu, right? So now that you have this, you know the basic structure of a Google form. And so you're going to go in and basically recreate this. So call this form whatever you want. And then your first question is basically going to follow this exact format. I like to go from largest to smallest. So location is obviously the biggest, department, then sales rep, right? Date should always go first in my opinion, just makes it a bit easier. So let's call this date. This will be the date that they enter in the data. It's gonna automatically change to a date type. Let's make this required. Now click here to add in another question. And you'll see our next one is gonna be location, department, sales rep. So the next question is you wanna ask them what location they are in. And then you're gonna have a drop-down list. So you can type in Austin, Chicago, Los Angeles, whatever your options are, you wanna include this here, right? Let's also make this required. You can also add in things. If you click on these 3 dots here, you can also add in a description. So say, input which location, some sort of note basically for them to look at, right? That's not really necessary, but you can do that. Now that we have this, you want to add in another question, and this will be department. So, and then you want to make this a drop down, okay? A drop down means they can only select one option. So we'll call this solar or roofing. Next question will be sales rep name. Now this one, you want to do a drop down. This one, I'm going to assume you have a long list of salespeople, right? So option 1, option 2, option 3, it's going to be a long list, right? Now let's say, I know with sales teams, a lot of people come and go. And an annoying part about using Google Forms is that when someone comes and goes, you have to kind of go in here, delete it. Whenever you get a new salesperson, you have to go in here and you have to add it in yourself, right? Add in like the new name. That can be a bit cumbersome, but unfortunately, that's kind of the only way to do it. Here's like a mini hack that you can do. You can keep like a list of all of your active salespeople here, right? So LeBron James, Kobe Bryant. I should have stuck with the Harry Potter theme. Harry Potter, Hermione. Oh, one other thing I suggest for you guys to do. Keep your naming conventions very structured. So for your salespeople name, so active sales team. So you might want to keep this like in a spreadsheet somewhere, right? I'd probably recommend that you guys do it on a dedicated tab like this. Now, you don't want to just put Michael here, right? And then put Michael J and then put Mike. You want to just do first and last name every single time, okay? You got to keep it structured because when you expand your team, it's going to get very confusing, right? So you want to make sure that you just keep everything structured the right way. Don't get lazy and just use the first name on some, and the data gets really messy. The cleaner your data is from the beginning, the easier it is to manage and scale up your entire process. Now, what I was saying is that let's say Harry Potter gets fired, right? So you can, instead of going in here and adding everything in here, what you can possibly do is just delete it from your active sales team, and then you can also like sort it right alphabetically, so it's always going to stay stored alphabetically. And then what you can do is and then just go in and basically delete every single one, and then you can just repaste it. The whole point of that entire past minute was to show you that you can just paste in things like this, right? Okay, so that might be a little bit easier to handle. Anyways, now we're going to make this a required field. Okay, now the next question we want to ask are now going to be our metrics, right? So if we go here, it's going to be knocks, pitches, leads, inspections, proposals, contracts. Now add a new question. This will be called knocks. Now this is going to be a short answer, but to make sure that they enter in a number, your sales reps enter in a number and not just some random text, because people will do that if they can. Go here, click here, go to response validation and say number, and just make it a whole number in this case, right? And then make it required. So now if they try to type in some sort of random text, which they will do, they're going to get an error message and they have to put in a number. You can put in a description, please, or in the error text, please enter a number. Enter 0 if none. Something like this, right? So now if they type in like a random thing, they're going to get this message. Now we're going to recreate this for the rest of the metrics. Just duplicate this here and then change this to pitches, change this to leads, change this to inspections, proposals, contracts. Now we're done. Now the last two questions will be just wins and challenges. We can make this into a paragraph so they can go a bit longer, not required. Copy it, call this challenges. Okay, now we're done creating our form, right? Now all we need to do is connect it to a spreadsheet. This Google form will automatically save, okay? It's automatically going to save as you work on it. So just click on responses and click on this Google Sheet icon. When you click on this, it says create a spreadsheet. You can either send this data into an existing spreadsheet or into a new spreadsheet. Now, I'll just do a new spreadsheet to show you guys. Hit create. And you'll see here, there's going to be a tab called form responses, okay? And then your data is going to come in here. So now that we have the spreadsheet saved, this is where the data is going into. Now, how do you share it with your team, right? Just go to send, and then you can either add them. So no, click here and go to send via link. You can shorten the URL, and then you can just copy and paste them and send them this link. So as soon as they paste this link in, they're going to be brought into here, right? And now they can, let me just fill one in for you guys. Chicago, Solar, Hermione, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, test, and test. And then just hit submit. Now, as soon as you hit submit, this data is gonna automatically come in here. Now, if you look at this data basically looks like, if I go back to my dashboard, my form data is exactly how it looks, right? It's missing the timestamp column because this timestamp automatically comes in with Google Forms data just to let you know when exactly it was submitted, right? But it can be different than the date because let's say a sales rep enters in 2 separate days at the same time because they forgot, right? So it's important to have the date column. Okay, so this is how it looks now. Now, when working with Google Forms data, it's important to note one thing, okay? Let's say you, for some reason, you have to have a formula here at the very end. So let's say all the data comes in. I'll put this in gray. Everything in gray will be Google Forms data. And let's say you need to add in a formula for some reason, which happens a lot. And we will need to do this later as well. Let's say you want whatever the contracts number is, you want to add 10 to it, right? So you're going to have this formula. I'm going to drag it all the way down. I'll call this column contract plus 10. So it's basically just K2 plus 10. This one is K3 plus 10. Now you would think when the next form response comes in, it's just going to come right in here, right? And then the formula will add. But what's actually going to happen is it's going to insert a new empty row and therefore push this formula down, and this formula won't stay here. So let me show you what I mean, okay? I'm going to go to submit another response, put in another random date, random location, doesn't matter. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then contracts I'll put 5 just to mix it up. Hit submit. Now you'll see here this cell is empty now, right? And then now this formula is pushed down. So there's two options to fix this when you want to work with Google Forms data. You can use either an array formula or you can project the data onto a new tab. So projecting data onto a new tab is really easy. So just create a new sheet. You can use any formula. You can literally just reference the cell, but I'm going to use the query formula and then just highlight all of this data. I'm just going to skip the timestamp column. So I'm just going to highlight from B here. So query everything from B1 to M, hit select all, close parentheses. Now I go over this query formula a lot in my upcoming video, in this video coming up, so just try to just keep that in mind. So now we have this here, right? And then now I can have my contract plus 10 here. So this would be, I'll call this one projected form data, okay? So all this tab is going to do is just project on every time something new is added to between here, it's just going to automatically go through here, okay? But the thing is, when a new form comes in, it's going to only affect these columns, and you can just have your formula here, right? So that's one way of doing it, like this. The other way of doing it is by using an array formula. What an array formula does is it keeps the formula only in one tab, right? In one cell, sorry. So it's going to look like this. So equals this plus 10, right? But now instead of just doing K2 plus 10 here, I'm going to do K2 to the very bottom plus 10. Nothing happened, right? You want to put this in an array formula like this. Wrap it in an array formula. Now what it's going to do is this formula is only going to exist here, but it's going to project out all the answers, 15 plus 10, 0 plus 10, and so forth. Now when you add in a new form, let me just add one real quick to show you that both ways work. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 for contracts. I'll put 25 for this one and then hit submit. Now you see here this 25 comes in, this array formula still stays right here, so it's going to continue adding down, and then my projected formula also works. So both ways work, right? There's pros and cons to both. I guess the better way is probably an array formula. The only downside of an array formula is sometimes it might be confusing for some people to write really complicated formulas in an array format. The downside with this version, projecting it on, is that when you go to the very bottom, let's say you have, so this formula goes down to cell 1000, right? Now let's say you get 1000 responses and then more rows are added. You might forget to drag this formula further down, so everything down here is not going to have a formula, right? So you have to remember to always kind of drag it down or just add like a ton of rows beforehand and then just drag this formula down so that you know you'll never run out. So that's kind of the only problem with this one, right? In my upcoming video, I do it using the projected. In the next section of this video, I do it in the projected form data format. So you'll see here when I'm showing you guys how to build the dashboard, it's using this projected form data version, right? Just so you know, because I have all of these helper formulas basically. Okay, so that's basically how to create the Google form and how to connect it to a Google Sheet. In the next section, we'll get into the kind of the main part of this video where I will show you how to build this dashboard using the query formula. Okay, so now that we have all of our data from the Google Forms into this tab here, I'm going to start showing you guys how to build this dashboard. So the first thing we want to do is we want to build out these filters or these drop-down menus here, and then I'll show you how to connect these filters to the data on the dashboard. I'm going to start by creating a brand new tab so we can work on it together. I'll call this new dashboard, and then I'll make the tab color green just so we know which one's the new one. And then I'm going to start by adding in where the drop-downs will be on the dashboard. So I'll put start date here, end date, and then here I will put location, department, and then sales rep. So when creating drop-down menus in Google Sheets, you basically just use something called data validation, and then just highlight the cells where you want the drop-down options to be, right-click it, and then go to more cell actions and data validation. For dates, it's really easy. Just change the criteria to date and then hit save. You can reject the input if they enter something that's not a date, but we're just going to show a warning. So what this does is when you double click into this, it brings up a calendar, right? And then if someone tries to type some text in, let's say they just type in like June or something, it's going to have a red flag and says input must be a valid date. So let me put in like a fake entry. So let's say I put in February 6th as the start date, and then I put April 24th as the end date. Now you can change the format depending on where you live. So in the United States, we'll change it to the US format here. So you just highlight the cells, format, number, date, and there you go. And I also want to format this a little bit. I want all of this, both of these rows centered. So I'll just highlight both rows here, center it, and then I want the first row of the drop-down menus to be bold. So I'm going to bold it. Now for location, and the rest of these, this is really simple too. Just right click where it'll be, hit data validation. Now keep it at list from a range, click here where it says select data range, and then we're going to go back to our form results and then just highlight column B where the location is. This will basically give all the drop down menu options in a unique format, so just highlight it down all the way to the bottom or just delete the numbers after B, so hit OK and hit save. Go back to the dashboard. Now we have all of these unique locations, right? And then we'll do the same thing for department and sales rep. One thing I also want to do for this to make it look a little bit better, I want to merge this horizontally so it looks has a little bit wider space. So highlight all the cells over, click here, and then hit merge horizontally. Now it looks like this, right? Let me kind of show you guys a shortcut for this. So instead of doing the same process that I just did, you can just highlight both of these cells, copy it, and then paste it here. Now I just changed this name to department, and then when I right click on here and I go to data validation, it's going to have the range, right? Now it says it's B, it's a B, right? Column B where location was. When I go back to our other tab, department is in column D. So I can literally just click on this and highlight it, or I can just change this, the B's to the D, right? And hit OK and then hit save. When I go back, it looks like this. Now sales rep on our source data is going to be column C. So it's the same exact thing. I'm just gonna highlight this, copy this over, change this to sales rep, right click this, go to data validation, and then I will change this to, I think I said that it was column C. So just change it to column C and then hit save, right? And sometimes it's nice to just know what columns these are. So just as a note, I'm going to put column B, and then for this, I'll put column C. This is the column where it is on the source data, right? So this is actually column D, and then this is column C. So I don't have to keep switching back and forth. Okay, so now we have this, you know what it looks like. Now there is one thing that's a little bit more advanced. Let's say we select the location filter of New Orleans, right? It would be ideal if sales rep only showed you the options that were in New Orleans, right? So it's kind of like a dependent dynamic drop-down menu option. I'm not going to go through that in this video. It's a little bit longer, but for now, if you're familiar with your team, it shouldn't be much of an issue. But I do have a more advanced course that will kind of teach you guys how to do some of these advanced tricks. But for now, this is good enough, and it'll get you guys to a pretty good dashboard already. So one thing I might want to do is format this a little bit and just go to view, show, and hide the grid line so it looks a little bit nicer. And then you can kind of add bordering format, things like that, right? So now that we have our filters in place, let's go to the next section of the dashboard. It'll be these scorecards, right? So what I'm going to do is create a metric here called, let's make this called knocks, right? And then ideally there will be like a number here, the number of knocks, and then we want it to connect to all of this data. To do this, I'm going to use the query formula. It's a really strong formula in Google Sheets. It basically replicates SQL. And if you look at my other dashboard videos, I go into really good detail about how to use this. And let me show you how this works. So you start by typing equals, I'll zoom in a bit, query, right? And then it's going to ask for the data and then the query. So the data is where the data will be. What the source data where we'll be querying the data will be. So let's go to our projected form data and let's highlight all the way over to the very end and go all the way down, or just delete the last numbers. So it's A1 through L, right? Now we hit comma. Now the way this query formula works is you do it by using certain clauses, right? So there's certain language clauses you can use. There's like 10. In this case, select is always the first one. And what I want right now is I want the sum of all the knocks, right? So the way the query formula works is that you reference column letters, so A, B, C, D, E, or F. So my knocks is in column E, right? And then I want the sum of it. So I'm gonna type in sum, and then the column E in capital letters like this, and then end quotation marks, and then close the parentheses. And you'll see that the output looks like this, sum knocks. Okay, and you also want to change it by using the label formula, right? So let me show you what it looks like. There's basically these clauses: select, where, group by, pivot, order by, limit, offset, label, format, options. And it has to go in this order, right? So if you have the select's always first, and then the where is next, group by, and so forth. I'll kind of explain a little bit further what this means. We're going to use the label clause to basically change the name of this so it doesn't say sum knocks. So I'm going to type label, and then you basically just type exactly what you had here, which is sum E, right? So we're going to label this metric, which is called sum E, and then you put single apostrophe quotes, and then we're just going to call it knocks. Now hit enter. Now it shows knocks. And then what we want to do is center this a little bit, and then maybe make this font a little bit bigger, and then bold this out, right? So this will be kind of the beginnings of the scorecard. Now with the query formula, like I said in my other videos here, what you want to do, I highly suggest that you organize the way this looks, because the formula can get quite long and it can look a lot more confusing and complicated than it really is. So use a click. So we're going to separate this out by lines, okay, by new lines. And to do that inside of a formula, click into it and click Option Enter. Hold Option Enter, and it'll bring it down to a new line. So what I like to do is I like to separate all of my clauses with new lines. So Option Enter, and then this last quote, I'll put it also at the very bottom. So now you can read the formula a lot easier. It just says select the sum of E says look at our source data, which is this other tab, A through L, and then just select the sum of E, and then we're going to label sum E knocks. That's it. Super simple. Now the question now is, how do we do it so that when we change the filters on here, this number is only going to show us the number of knocks between the start date and the end date, right? And the way we do that is we use this where clause here. And that comes after select if you look at this list here, right? So like I said, Option Enter, type in where, and then you would say something normally like this. This is going to look a bit complicated, but if you look at our form data, column A is where the date is, right? So basically what we want to tell the formula is we want to select all of the sum of knocks, but only where column A, which is the date, is in between these two dates, right? So if it's in between these two dates. Now it would normally look something like this, where A is greater or equal to whatever is in B3, so B3, and A is less than or equal to whatever is in C3, right? So this is kind of the logical way that you would think that this formula would work. I'm gonna get an error, but it's fine. So one thing, when you reference other cells inside of the query formula, you have to put it inside quotes and an ampersand. So, and don't worry guys, I'm going to have like a basic version of this sheet available for download, so you guys can just kind of download this exact sheet for yourself, and it'll have all these formulas already written, and it'll be a lot easier for you guys to follow along. So check that out in the description, okay? So I'm going to wrap my cell reference inside 3 quotation marks and an and two and signs. So now it knows that it's referencing where the column A in projected form data is greater or equal than whatever's in here, and less than or equal to whatever's in here, right? Hit enter. Now the reason why it doesn't show anything is because when we're working with dates, it gets a little bit more confusing, okay? You have to kind of declare a few things, but like I said, this formula will be available for you guys to copy. So I'm just going to copy what the formula actually looks like and explain afterwards. Okay, so it basically looks like this. You basically say where A is greater or equal to, you have to declare that you're doing a date, and then in between the and quotation marks, I basically use the text formula to say that, to convert it to a date format, right, to a text format. And that's just how you have to do it in this formula. It's a bit confusing, but if you just download the sheet and save this, it'll be really easy to use, okay? And then hit enter. So now you'll see if I change this date now, it's only going to show me the number of knocks in between the start date and the end date, which is basically what we want, right? One thing I want to change here is the format of this to a number so that it shows a comma. So click on the cell, hit format, hit number, and then hit number, and then just get rid of all the decimal points. Okay, so now we have the number of knocks within this date range only. Now the next question is, how do we make it so that when we change the filter to Chicago or New Orleans or whatever location, it actually updates this as well. This is also in the where clause, and you separate the where clauses out by ands, right? So I'm going to put a new row, a new line, and then hit and. Now our location is what in column B, right, in the source data. This is why I wrote it down, so I don't have to go back and forth. Where B equals, now same thing I told you guys, 3 quotation marks, 2 and signs, 3 quotation marks, and whatever is in E3. Okay, so now we're gonna put E3. Now it's only gonna show me the number of knocks in between in between the start date and end date here, and then where column B or the location equals Chicago. The next thing we want to add now is department, right? So this is also really simple. Now I'm going to reformat this. I like to reformat this to make this as easy as possible. I actually like it when the and is here, so everything starts the same. So I'm going to move this up. So now I can see easily that there's 3 where clauses, right? Where A is greater than the date, less than the date, and then B equals this. Now I'm going to add an and, don't forget the and, in the new row, I'm going to put where column D, it's departments in column D in the source data, equals, you know what's better is to actually just copy this and then paste it. And then where D is equal to whatever is in H3, right? Now if I select a department, now it's only going to show me the number of knocks that are in roofing, Chicago, and between that date, right? So that's pretty cool. Now the next thing, the last one we're going to add is sales rep. So I'll put and, enter, where column C is equal to K3. Now I can select, let's say Austin roofing, and then I know that Harry Potter is inside of Austin roofing, so it's going to show. Like I said earlier, it would be great if it only shows me everyone that's in Austin roofing, but like I said, if you're familiar with your team, this shouldn't be much of an issue, and maybe you won't have this many sales reps. But if you guys want to know how to do a dynamic dependent dropdown, just check out the course description in the link below. Okay, so now that we have this here, you might see one problem is that what I really want is if these are empty. So if these are empty here, we want this to show the total number that's in Austin, right? And if this is empty here, we want it to show the total number of knocks. We don't want to have to select something. There needs to be like a show all, right? And the show all should be empty. So in the next section, let me show you guys how to do that part. Okay, so this is basically what I will call using multiple filters and a show all in the query formula, right? Now this is a little trick that I think I've created myself. I haven't seen anyone else really do it on YouTube or anything, but I go into really good detail in this video, okay? How to create drop-down filters on your Google Sheets, blah, 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 advanced trick. So the way that I want to do this is by using helper columns. I used to do this by using an if formula and then just have two queries, but it gets really hard to manage, okay? So I think this is probably the best way of doing it. So you want to go to your source data. In this case, it's going to be the projected form data here. And then I want to add a column for each of these filters: location, department, sales rep. So I'm going to call this location filter, and then I will call this department filter. Then I'll call this sales rep filter. So these are all helper columns, okay? Now, the goal of this is going to be quite simple. All I want it to do is I'm going to have it say true, like this, all the way down. I want it to say true all the way down if these are empty, right? And then if I select something like Austin, I want it to only show true where the location is Austin, right? So let me kind of hide some of this so I can, let me hide some of these columns so I can show you guys easily. Okay, so the idea is to have these helper columns show true only when something is selected here, and then if it's empty, then have true for all of them. And then the reason why we want that is we're going to change our filter, our query formula, to only grab rows that have a true in these columns, right? And I'll show you guys what this means, how to do this. Okay, so you're going to go into the location filter in the first row available, hit equals. We're going to use an if statement here. Okay, so if statements are one of the best formulas to become really comfortable with. So it's if the logical expression, and then you're going to put in the value if the statement returns true, and the value if the statement returns false. So I'm going to put if location here. Oh, whoops. Okay, let me delete this first. So I'm going to put equals if whatever is in location, which is in E3. I know I merged it, but the value is in cell E3. If this equals blank, and to use blank, just put two quotation marks with nothing in between. So if this is empty, I want it to return true. If it's false, for now, I'm going to have it say false for now. And then I'm going to hit enter, and you'll see here, now I'm going to drag this formula down, but don't forget to lock this with $signs, their cell reference, so that we are only, as we drag the formula down, it still only references cell E3, okay? So you can drag this down a couple of ways like this, or I like using hotkeys. So on a MacBook, it's Command Shift down arrow. It brings you all the way down. On a PC, whenever I say Command, just use Control, okay? Now I'm going to press Command D, and it's going to drag the formula all the way down. Now, what this does is, if this is empty, it's going to return true for every single row. Now, if I select something, it's going to show false, right? Based on our formula here. Now, what I want to change this now to is, now if it's empty, have it show true. But if there is a selection and that selection matches whatever's in this row's location, so this one here, then I want it to show true for that row only. The way that I do that is I go into my false section, so this is if it's false, and then I'm going to add another if statement. Now I'm going to put if whatever is in this cell E3 where the dropdown is equal to B2, which is the location. Oh, it didn't go through. If here equals here, then true, else I'm going to put false, right? And then again, don't forget to lock this reference to E3 with $signs. Now I'll do the same thing, and I'm going to drag this formula all the way down. Now, instead of having it show false, I actually want it to be empty, so it's a bit easier to see, right? So I'm just going to leave this empty and drag this all the way down. Now you'll see that because on this dashboard Chicago is selected, it's going to show true for Chicago, because at first it's going to check if it's empty, and it's not empty, right? So it's going to move on to the if it's not empty, and it's going to do this part of the formula, right? And you can also rearrange this formula just like how I did earlier to make it a little bit easier to read, right? So what I might do is move this one on down. I guess it doesn't really make that big of a difference. Okay, anyways, so now we have true. Now this works the way that we want it to work. If it's empty, it's going to show true for everything. Now what we're going to do is go back to our little formula here, and we're going to get rid of these three clauses, right? Because we're not using this anymore. So let me delete these three clauses. Now the date's going to stay the same. We're just going to delete this and hit enter. Whoops. Because we have to get rid of this and, because there's no more clauses afterwards for now. So now we're going to change this formula from just selecting sum e where the date's in between this. I'm going to now change it to where m equals true. So I only want to show the sum of the knocks where m equals true, right? Now to do that, I'm going to add that and back, and m equals true. Now this is going to bring me an error, and let me explain to you guys why. Okay, it's good to show you guys these error messages. It says unable to parse query string because there's no function query parameter, no column m. Basically after the colon is where the real error is, no column m. What this means is I am trying to tell this formula to only pull sum e where m is true. So I'm telling it to look at column m. But the thing is, the data I told it to look at only is through A1 through L. So you have to make sure that you include whatever columns you're going to reference in your formula in the into the data, right? The source data. So in this case, I'm going all the way to O. Now, technically, you can just put Z or AA just to be extra safe, and you'll never run into that error. But there are some issues with that. So it's probably best to just go up into the column that you want. Right? So in this case, I'm changing this because I'm going to reference up until column O. So let me go back to my formula, double click into it, and change the source data to A1 through O and hit enter. Now I have the number of knocks for everything, right? But if I change this, and the reason why it's pulling it, because it's where m equals true, and it's going to be true for everything because it's empty for the drop-down menu option. But if I select Austin, now the form data is going to show true because it matches what's in location here. And now it's only going to show me for Austin. So now I get to choose something, but I also get to delete it, and it's still going to show all of it, right? So as you can imagine, what we're going to do is do that for department and sales rep. So the department drop down is in cell H3 and K3. Okay, so let me write this down, H3 and K3, so I don't have to keep going back and forth. That's where the buttons are. So now I just go in here, I press enter to open up this formula, and I'm just going to copy everything. Copy this, I'm going to double click into here, and then just paste the formula exactly how it is. Now, oh wait, there's one thing I want to do before I do that. You'll see here, true shows for everything down here, right? Because technically this is empty, so it's just going to show true. What we want to do to fix that is add in another if statement and say if, I use this combination all the time, so make sure that you guys get used to this. It's if equals A2 equals blank, then blank, otherwise run the formula. So basically it's saying if this is empty, then don't run this formula. If it is, then run the formula, right? And if I bring this all the way down, now this is going to be empty. Now this isn't really an issue. It's not really going to have any real effects to the formula, but it bugs me when things go to the bottom and there's nothing really there. Okay, so now I can copy this over and I can paste this in here. And you'll see here, I just need to change a couple things. I need to change the department button is not an E3, it's actually an H3, like I wrote down here. So I changed all the E3s to H3. Now instead of having it equal B2, I just have it equal where it says department here, which is going to be D2. Now same thing, I just drag this all the way down and bam. So now what it does is if there's nothing in department, it's going to hit true. If I select solar, it's only going to show true for the solar rows, which is like kind of random, but over here. So solar, all the roofings are empty. Okay, now the last thing we want to do now is add this in for the sales rep. So same thing, copy it over. Sales rep buttons in K3. So we change all the H3s to K3, and then the sales rep is in C2 here. Bring this all the way down. I can delete this now. Now, if I select roofing, Austin, and Harry Potter, why didn't that work? Harry Potter, let me go and check why that didn't work. Sales rep, K3, oh, okay. So this part works fine, the back end works fine, but I forgot to add it into here. So all I have so far is where M equals true, right? I need it to be showing where and M, N, and O are true, because I'm only showing the rows now where all three are true, right? So if I go back here, I just put in and then I say H equals true and K equals true. Now you might be wondering why I don't have to put quotation marks around true or single apostrophes. It's because true is one of the, I guess you could call them a reserved word, right? It's a reserved word, and you don't have to put it for true or false, or like the words like and stuff. And in my advanced query course, I kind of go over this stuff, but for now, just know there are certain reserved words. Otherwise, you usually have to put not, so put the apostrophes. Okay, anyways, where equals true. Okay, so why doesn't it show anything here? Where, oh, whoops, MH, it should be O. MNO, not MHK. Okay, cool, perfect. So now I can select, let me zoom out a little bit. Now I can select Luna Lovegood. Well, she's not in Austin, apparently. Luna Lovegood. Maybe she doesn't have any data within this date range. Let me see. Okay, yeah, so she didn't have data within this date range. So I can select, you know, like, I don't know, Hermione, and then it'll show it for them, right? If I delete it, it'll show all. I can do Chicago, etc. Okay, so now, as you can imagine, to do this for the next parts, pitches, leads, inspections, proposals, contracts, I just have to basically adjust this formula, right? So I can just copy this entire formula, go to wherever I want to put pitches. Now, instead of hitting sum E, pitches is going to be in sum F, right? So all I have to do is change sum E to sum F everywhere, and then change this word to pitches like this, right? And to copy the format over easily, just highlight with the original format where it's correct, paint format, and then click here. So that's pretty simple, right? I can just do this all the way across like this. And that's pretty much how I taught you guys how to do this in my kind of 3 dashboard videos on by using the query formula. But there's actually, I think, a more efficient and better way of doing it now that I've just kind of realized. And basically, if you think about what I'm doing with the filters here, I'm doing it at a formula level, right? Or an element level. So in this next section, I'm going to go over how you guys can do this in a more efficient way by doing it at a global level. And what I mean by this is, if I do this at an element, at every element or every formula in this dashboard, if I need to make any changes, I need to go through every single formula and basically update everything, right? Update every clause, and it can get a little cumbersome to maintain. And maintenance is important when doing these dashboards. You have to think about future problems and things like that. So the way that I want to do it now is, instead of having the filter at this level, I want the filter at a global level, which in this case means a new tab. Now the idea of this is that I'm going to create a new tab, and I'm going to call it filtered data here, right? Filter data. And then what I want to do is I want to just show all of this data already, and I just want to filter it by whatever filters we select on this dashboard here, right? And then what I'll do is I'm just going to reference that new tab and just sum up the number of knocks by using the sum formula, right? So if I need to make any changes to the filter, I only do it in one place, and then it's going to automatically update everywhere else. Let me show you guys how to do this. So basically, I go to this new tab. All I do is hit, type in equals query, highlight all of this data here, and then I basically just apply all of these filters that I did, where select all the rows. The only difference is I use select all, which is you use select all by using an asterisk, right? So here in this formula, I use sum of E, right? But now instead of doing sum of E, I'm doing select all, where I'm going to say where the date column A is this, and using the true helper columns, where M equals true, blah, 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 blah. But instead of doing that, I basically have this entire formula written down here, right? So I'm just going to copy this. Now there's one thing you should know when I paste this formula into here. It's going to reference whatever is in B3, right? But the thing is, I'm not referencing B3 in this tab. I'm referencing B3 in the new dashboard tab, right? So that's an important thing to realize. So a couple changes to this formula to make it work. Instead of selecting sum E, I'm going to put asterisk, right? And I don't need to change the name of these columns because these name of these columns are already what they are, okay? Now, I need to make sure that this references whatever is a new dashboard. So I can do this one of two ways. I can go here and just delete this, and then go in here and click on it. You'll see the syntax, right? So it should be like B3 or something. So B3, and then hit enter. And then do the same thing here, where I can just kind of copy and paste this over, right? And then change this to C3. Okay, now it works. I'm going to freeze this so I can scroll up and down. Okay, so now what we have, this filter data, I'm going to make this yellow. So now we have all of our original data, but now this tab is filtered, and it's filtered by whatever filters we have here. So if I delete this, now it's going to show every location, right? If you look here. But if I change this to Chicago, it's only going to filter it by Chicago, right? Similarly, if I do Austin, same thing, Austin only now. And then if I do sales rep Harry Potter, it's only going to show me the rows where it's Austin and Harry Potter, right? So as you can imagine, now all I have to do if I want to this is I can just sum it up. Instead of using this complicated formula for every single element, I can literally just delete this, just type in the word Knox instead of using labels, equals sum. Everyone knows a sum formula. Go back to my filter data, and then just highlight from E2 down. It's going to sum up everything in E2 all the way down, and hit enter. Now, it just looks like this. Now I can just literally change it like this, and it's so much more simple, right? It's the same result, but it's a different mechanism. And the reason why I'm doing it this way is because you can just easily change the name of this here, and then if I need to make any changes to this formula, let's say now I want to add in another helper column, or I want to add in another criteria or another drop-down menu in the dashboard, right? I can just change that formula in one place instead of going to every single one of these elements and changing it there. You can imagine how much time it saves and just how much less likely you are to get mistakes, right? So same thing now. I'm just going to delete this, hit pitches, and then I'm going to do leads, inspections, proposals. Now with the query formula though, I do need to warn you guys that since we are selecting by column headers, so we're using by column letters. If anything in this source data changes, if you add in a new column in between, it's going to mess up the entire dashboard. So I would definitely try as hard as you can to set this up, how you want it already, and then just add new columns to the right, because it won't really be complicated if you do it that way. There are certain kind of tricks that you guys can go to kind of make it a little bit safer, and like I said, I'll kind of go over this more like on my advanced course. Okay, there's not time for that on this video. Okay, so this is really easy now. Now I just copy this formula. Instead of doing sum E, pitches is in sum F of this, right? Leads is in G. this is an H, this is an I, and then this is in J, I think. Okay, cool. And then, like I said, to fix the format of this, just highlight one where the format is correct, and then just highlight everything else, and it'll automatically update. Okay, perfect. Now you can see, we kind of have the beginnings of our dashboard. So that shows you guys how, like a little advanced trick on how to use multiple filters, but also have it show all when it's empty, right? So I think that's a pretty cool trick. Now for this next section here, I want to go over how to do this part of the dashboard, which is kind of going against the current versus previous period, right? To give you a percent change over the selected date versus the previous period. Now what this is so if I were to select, let's kind of shorten the date range a bit. If I were to do, let's do January 9th, 2002 through January 16th, right? So that's one full week. Let's start on a Monday. Most companies do it that way. Monday through Sunday. Okay, so this is 7 full days. What I want to do is compare it against the 7 days prior, right? So from 10 to 16 is the selected or the current period. The previous period is going to be 3 through 9, right? And I want this to show the previous period no matter how many numbers of days that we select. So for example, if I select just January 11th through 12th, that's 3 full days, 10, 11, 12. I want it to compare against the previous 3 days, 9, 8, and 7, right? So I will say that this is the current period, and then this will be versus previous period. And then let's make this font a little bit smaller. Okay. So it'll look like this, and then to make it a little bit easier so you guys can understand what's going on here, let's just have this here to show you guys the selections. Okay, so when working with dates in Google Sheets, it can get really confusing, so I want to shorten the date range as much as I can while I'm trying to figure out the formula, right? So I'm going to just select from January 11th to January 12th. Now that's obviously just 2 full days of data, and just as an extra little thing, since we are using, if you look back at our filter formula, our query formula, we're doing where date is greater and equal to the date in the first selection of the drop-down menu. And then we're doing it where the date is less than or equal to. We're not doing just less than, we're doing less than equal to, right? So it's including the dates that are on here. That's important to know, and that's why we are counting this as 2 full days, right? Not just 1 day. So we want to use a formula called days. Really easy. This formula basically just shows you the number of days between 2 dates. You put the end date, and then you put the comma, and then you put the start date. So this means days in between. There's 1 day in between the start date and the end date. But what we really want, what number we're looking for, is total number of days, right? The total number of days in this data set is 2. So to include the end date here, because this is just showing days between, we're just going to add 1. So the days formula plus 1. So now we have 11 to 12 has total number of 2 days. Now the previous period in this particular case is obviously going to be, so 11 to 12 is now, it's going to be 9 and 10, right? So it's 2 full days here, and we want to show the 2 full days here, right? So to do that, all we're going to do is take the start date and subtract it by this number here. So I'm going to copy this here, and then I'm going to type in equals this start date minus, now you have to make sure to add in the parentheses, otherwise it's going to mess everything up, okay? Order of operations, apparently. Okay, so now we have this, the start date is going to be the 9, whoops, and then same thing, equals end date minus parentheses, like this. So you'll see here the previous period, this is the start date, right? And then this is going to be the current period here. Now, whatever I select, let's say I select 10 through 20th, right? That's going to be 11 total days of data. The previous 11 days from January 10th is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So the December 29th all the way until the day before, which is January 9th. So now we know our formula is working correctly. So this is a formula that we need to use, okay? Now, where to use that formula? There are several ways of doing this. I'm just going to show you an easy way that requires using a helper tab. Now, this filter data is going to be the data for the current period, right? Because whatever start date we choose here, it's only going to show the rows that have that date, right? So I'm going to change this name to filter data, but in parentheses, I'm going to put current period. Now we want another tab, the helper tab, to be filter data, but we want it to be called the previous period. And as you can imagine, what this tab is going to do is it's going to pull in all the rows that fit within this previous period, so I can compare it against this, right? Now, how do we get the previous period? We basically just take whatever date, the start date, end date, and we subtract it by this, right? So if I go into my little query formula up here, so it's where date equals B3, but now I'm going to add in, I'm going to subtract that little date formula that we just had in, okay? And like I said, this is all going to be in the spreadsheet that you guys can download in the description, so you guys can have all these formulas. So I'm going to copy everything from the minus over, okay? And then when I go to previous period, all I have to do now is paste in that section. Now it's important to know when I paste this in, it's going to reference cells C3 and B3 in this tab when I want to reference it in the other tab. So how do we do that? I think you guys can figure it out, but you can just type it in between apostrophes, dash, it has to be exactly like how it's spelled here, okay? And then exclamation mark. So that's the syntax for it. I'm going to copy this over. Okay, so that takes care of the start part. Now let's do the end part. Oh wait. Okay, yeah, this is correct. Sorry. So this can get a bit confusing, okay? So let me just do the start date first. This is why I said it's good to have these on separate rows. Now I'm going to go here and I'm going to paste this part in. Whoops. So I'm going to paste this part of copy this part of the formula. I'm going to move this down and then I'm going to add this in. Okay, so now it's saying on this previous period tab, it's going to select all of the data where, depending on the selection of the dashboard, it's going to be that selection minus however many days are in between the start date, end date, however many days are in the start date, end date, right? In this case, it's 11. It shows you that it's 11 days. And then I'll hit enter. Now, let's constrain this to make sure that our formula works correctly. Let's just do from January 11th to January 12th. Now this current period is only going to show us data between January 11th and January 12th, right? Which is correct so far. And then the previous data should only show us January 9th and January 10th, previous period. Okay, so there's no data on January 9th. That's just because there's no data on January 9th. Let me do 12 and 13. So it should show us 12 and 13 in the current period, and then on the previous period it should show 10 and 11. 10 and 11, correct. And no matter how big we make this, 3 days, it's going to work correctly. 11, 12, 12, 13, 14, 10, 11. Okay, there's no 9, which is kind of annoying. This kind of messes up everything I'm trying to do, but 15. Okay, so 10, 11, 12. So 10, 11, 12 on the previous period. Okay, so I think you guys understand that this works. Now you can keep this here if you guys want to show people the number of what the previous date range is and then what the current period is and what this total days is. It actually might be a little bit helpful, but the way that I built it, I didn't show it, but let's just leave it on for now, okay? Now, to get versus the previous period, right? I think you guys can figure this out. It's pretty easy. So I'm going to sum the knocks on the previous period. Right, let's center this for now. So this is the number of knocks in the previous period, right? But I don't want the exact number. I want the percent change, right? And the percent change formula is really easy. You should probably get to know it real well. Percent change formula. It's basically new minus old divided by old. So that's how I always remember it, okay? It's new minus old divided by old. So this is the number, right, of this. So this is technically the old number, and this is the new number, right? New, old. So it's basically just in parentheses, new minus old, parentheses, okay, divided by old. That's all it is. So it's a minus 50% change. So that means in the previous period, we had basically 800 knocks. In the new period, we had 400 knocks. So there was a 50% decrease. 50% of 800 is 400. There's a 50% decrease week over week, right? And the actual number of change, you guys can say, is this minus this. So it's new minus old, right? So it's 405. You can include this too if you want, right? So technically you can have this here, so you guys can have like a whole number. And then let's do the percent change without referencing this, okay? We want to build a real formula that doesn't have a bunch of helper cells. So this is the previous period. This is the new period, right? So we're going to call this, we're going to copy this new period one. So it's going to be sum of new period minus this. This is the old period. I'm going to put this in parentheses, and then let me copy the old number of knocks one more time, and then I'm going to divide it by this. So it's basically, as you can see here, let me separate this out, format this a little bit. I love formatting my formulas. So you see here, it's basically new minus old divided by old, and hit enter, right? And now we have this percent change. Okay. So you can show them versus the period versus the previous period, or you can do plus or minus actual. Wait. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, so you can figure this out where you can show them the actual number of knocks, increase, decrease, or you can just show a percentage like I did. Okay, so now that we have this, we want to add this across to every other metric in the funnel stage, right? But first, I want to add in some conditional formatting. Now for conditional formatting, you just highlight the cells where you want it to show, and then let's go to single color. So, and then just say format the cells. If it's greater than 0, then we want it to be green. Add another rule. If it's less than 0, we want it to be red, and just hit OK. Now, we can just, what's the best way of doing this? Okay, so unfortunately we have to copy this entire formula over and then just change it to E, from E to F, because F is where the pitches are. E, F, this one is going to be G. And G, H. We're basically just going to repeat this process out for all of them. H, this one is I. Almost done. And then this last one is going to be J for contracts. So now that we have this, the next thing we want to do is just copy the formatting over, and I think you guys already probably know how to do that. Oh man. Okay, so this is a good thing to show. 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, so this is a good thing to show. The error we have is can't be divided by 0, right? And I'm kind of annoyed because I have to wrap everything. I forgot about this, but this basically means probably that there were either no contracts the previous period, or there was basically it has to divide it by 0, right? So let's go to the previous period, and the number of contracts, surprisingly, is actually 0. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to divide 6 divided by 0, right? And it gives us an error. Now this error message is pretty ugly. So the next thing you want to do is you want to always add in an if error, right, to all of this stuff. If error, and what this does is gives you the value here, but then it tells you what to say if there is an error, right? You put this in quotation marks. So in the example, you can just put in an error like this, which I think looks silly, right? What you actually wanted to show, in my opinion, is either a no data, or in my case, I just put in a dash like this. So now this looks a lot more clean, right? Now you have to go through and wrap every single other one. I would have done that at the very beginning before I copied the formulas over, but I won't do this in this video for you guys, but you get the basic idea. Now you want to copy this conditional formatting over, just basically do this. Cool. Okay, so you'll see now what we have. I can probably delete this now. We have the beginnings of our dashboard. So we can see versus the previous period, it's going to be red if it's a negative, a green if it's positive. If I do Harry Potter, so towards the end of the funnel, you're more likely to have these errors because they're less likely to happen than at the top of the funnel, right? Yeah. Okay. So another one. I should have just done this all the way across, but okay. We're gonna loop in. Cool. So yeah, this is how you do this for the scorecards versus the previous period. Now, if you look at our dashboard, we're pretty close to having it look pretty good. Of course, you want to add in your borders and the formatting and all the aesthetic stuff, right? But let's get all the data out there first. What we want now is we want to add in these charts. So the next section, let me show you guys how to add a few of these basic charts. I'll probably show you guys how to do all of this. I might not do this current versus previous because it's a little bit complicated. So it might be like in an advanced version of this video. But let's go to the sales funnel stages. So the sales funnel stages is basically just a representation of the raw number per each sales funnel stages that happen, right? So what we want to do is create a table that kind of looks like this and then just create a chart. So let's start with the table. So I will add this in, let's see, put this in cell B25. Now this is also just going to be another query formula. There's going to be multiple ways to do this. You can use some ifs. I'm just going to use query because that's what we've been using so far. So I want to filter the current data period. Let me delete some of these filters so it shows all of the data. And let me widen this date range so that we have more data to look at. Okay. Okay, so here under, I'll put my table here, equals query. I want to zoom in so you guys can see it a bit better. Equals query, close this. Current period, select all of this data here. Now, what we want to do is basically just select the sum of the knocks, sum of pitches, sum of leads, sum of inspections, sum of proposals, and sum of contracts. And then just close it out. So this is what we have now, right? This is not that helpful because the format's a bit weird. Now this is because of the way that this format is. It's kind of like it's not really a table format, which isn't really ideal for building dashboards, but given that we have the data coming through Google Forms, and this is the simplest way to show you guys, you can do it this way. Usually it would be the format wouldn't be like a pivot table, but that's for a different day. So to fix this, we want to transpose this data because this is what we want it to look like this. Okay, like this. Now this brings us to one of my next favorite formulas. Is called transpose. We're just going to wrap this in a transpose formula. And what the transpose does is it basically just transposes it from the columns to the rows and the rows to the columns, right? So it just switched it up basically. And then what we can do here is we can work in this query formula now to basically label this because we don't want it to say sum, right? So the quickest way to do this is copy everything you have in your select, which is all the metrics, and then hit label and then just paste it in like this, right? And of course, like I said, I like to have everything sectioned out because let me show you what it looks like if you guys don't section it out, okay? I'll just section this part out even. So I'm going to do label sum at whatever, and then I want to change this one to Knox. Right, so after every metric, you just put a space, and then you put 2 apostrophes, and you put the name of what you want it to be, right? And then for every new metric that you name, you put in a comma in between. Obviously, the last one won't have a comma. So it looks like this. Inspections. And this will look a lot cleaner when I show you guys the difference when you format it. Proposals. And then we have contracts. That's it. So we've changed everything. Now look how like hard to read this formula is, right? Like it looks so much more difficult, but really it's really simple when you format it out. So let's keep the selects on the same one for now, just because it's not that hard. But for label, I pretty much always put every metric that I label into a new row, just because it just makes it so much easier to read. And then let's put this at the very bottom. We can even move the transpose down if you want. And then let's section this out. And then let's move this even further down. Okay, so how much easier is this to read, right? We're basically selecting, you can even put these on a new row and it'll even be easier. It's a lot more scrolling, but let's just do it. Now in real SQL, you don't have to do all this. It's so much easier. You literally just do, sum whatever as on the same row, but this is the best Google Sheets can do for now. So we're basically just selecting, I like the other way better. We're just selecting these and then we're labeling like this, right? This is so much easier to read. So this is what we have now, right? What we want now is to have it look like this. Now, like this. Now this part now is going to be really easy to build. So let's go here. So we can just call this one, let me move this down one. Call this one stages. And then we'll call this the quantity or volume. I guess we can call it volume. And then now we want to do percent versus previous. Now what this number is going to be is it's going to show the down funnel conversion rates, right? So it's going to show the percentages of knocks that become pitches, pitches that become leads, and so forth. To do this, we just divide the last step by the first step, by the step previous to it, right? So just drag this all the way down. So we're dividing this one by this one, dividing this one by this one, right? And the first one obviously doesn't have a previous stage, and then we can do it versus initial if you want. This would be the percentage against the initial step, which is knocks, right? So for this, you would just divide this divided by this, but the difference now is we lock row 26. So it's always dividing against row 26. And then just to make it look a little bit easier for now, let's just get rid of all the decimal points, okay? And then what I have here is a sparkline. Now I have a sparkline video that gives in detail how to do this. It's not that hard as you can look at it, but it basically gives me a visual of the lower funnel in a bar chart, right? So this one is technically the max, and I'll show you guys why, because this is a little bit hard to tell that, the relationship between inspections and leads, because the number of knocks versus contracts is so great that it skews the chart, right? So this kind of gives me an idea. I can look at this and know that half of the inspections become proposals. I can't tell that by looking at this. So that's the only reason why I added that. So let's just do one here. Let's start this at leads. Okay, and then drag this down. I have a sparkline video showing you guys how to do this. Just look for it in my videos. Okay, so I'll call this lower funnel since it's a lower funnel graph. Bold this out if I want to. Now I just want to add this graph, right? All I do is highlight. You can highlight all of it. So let me just show you how it works. Highlight all of it. Insert chart. So highlight all the data, insert chart. Now here I want it to look like this bar chart. So I'm just going to click on the chart under setup, chart type here. I want to use row 25 as headers. Where's row 25? you can just play around with these buttons, but basically row 25 is a header, which it's already using as a header, but let's just do it anyways, and then use column B as labels, which is correct. Now, for the y-axis, right, is the one going up and down. Let's go to setup. It's going to be stages, which is correct, and then all we really want to show is the volume in this particular case. So I can remove everything here. Remove. Don't need the lower funnel. Let's hit aggregate and get rid of it. It basically just means that we're aggregating the volume by stages, which is it's already doing, but I need to do that to get rid of that button. And then go to customize, go to series. Series means each little bar, right? It's called a series, and then we're going to go to data labels so that we can show our data labels. And you notice there's no commas here. It's because it's going to take on the format of whatever we have in our source data. So to do that, let's highlight this section here, go to format, number, let's make it a number, and then remove everything here. So now it shows commas. It's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so, and then also, I'll probably do a series on charts soon so you guys can better understand charts, but we can do the chart title. Let's call this sales funnel stages, and I think it looks a lot cleaner if you go to grid lines, and then let's change it to horizontal, and let's get rid of all of these grid lines, like these ugly gray lines. Okay, so now we have this here. We can even center this title. Just double click wherever it is, center it, and we're good to go. Okay, so let's move this here. Okay, one thing, so the reason why I added this lower funnel chart is so it's easier to read, right? Because these, when the range between the highest and the lowest numbers are so high, it's going to skew the bar chart. What you can do is click on here. You can go to, I believe it's under series, or it's under, let's go with the horizontal axis. You can change it to a log scale, logarithmic scale, where it basically, it works with larger data sets a little bit better. Obviously, you know, 2600 of 13,000 isn't going to look like this, but this can kind of give you a more, I guess, like not a realistic, but it kind of just makes things a little bit easier to read in a bar chart when the numbers are so large. So you can do it this way if you want. Yeah. Okay, so we have this part now. Now we want to create this funnel conversion, right? The funnel conversion is basically the versus the previous step here. It shows us in a chart here, right? One thing, let's add in a some conditional formatting as well. So let's go to format here, conditional formatting, color scale. Let's make the lowest number be red, the highest number be green, and then it looks like this. You can add this everywhere, so it looks a little bit more interactive. And then you want to add in your borders and all that good stuff too, okay? Okay, so the funnel conversion. There's a couple ways to do this. We can kind of technically just do it this way if you want. Let's go to charts. And then we are going to remove this. And then we can basically show it this way, right? And this works too. This is actually probably perfectly fine. But for me, I want to customize. I don't want to show the word Knox, and I want to call this my own metric, right? Some people, like, for example, click-through rate, you know, is like impressions to clicks, right? But they call it CTR. So maybe you have your own metrics for like closing volume. You know, you can customize things a little bit better. So I'm just going to write my own query, and plus I can show you guys how to work more with the query formula. Okay, so I will start here. Just put a random little table here. I'm going to query our current data. And then what I want now is from Knox to pitches, right? Knox to pitches is basically pitches divided by Knox. So one thing you can do in the query formula is you can basically select the sum of F. You can do some basic arithmetic right in here. So sum of F divided by sum of E, right? And then it's going to have this crazy name. It's basically going to say the quotient, which is the division of the sum of pitches divided by the sum of knocks. Looks pretty ugly, but you know, it kind of works, right? Let's kind of put this in parentheses. So we want to repeat this process for all of it. So let's go back to the current period, highlight everything, select sum of F divided by sum of E, comma, I want this, like I said, when you really space things out, when you format things out, it makes things a lot easier to read in the query formula. So especially for complicated ones like this, right? So for this one, I will make a new row for every single division. This one is going to be sum of G divided by sum of E. This one will be sum of H, E and G, H divided by G. I messed this up. It's good to write this stuff out beforehand. So it's F divided by E, then it's G divided by F. See, G divided by F, and then it's H divided by G. This one's I divided by H. Divided by H. Oops. And then this last one I divided by, is J divided by I. Divided by I. And that is it, right? And then we obviously don't want these ugly names. So let's add some new rows, and let's call this label, and then let's label, I'm adding the apostrophes beforehand. So let's label this first one is going to be called pitches. Now you can have better names for this, but I'm just going to call this pitches to leads. Use the number 2 because it's cool, I guess. We'll go leads to inspections. We'll call this one inspections to proposals. Oh, did I miss one? Pitches to leads, leads to inspections, inspections to proposals, proposals to contracts. So I missed one somewhere. So we have knocks. Oh, whoops. This is knocks to pitches. Knocks to pitches. Pitches to knocks. Oh, I missed. Okay, yeah. So I didn't scroll all the way over. Pitches. Oh, pitches to leads. Leads to inspections. Inspections to proposals. And then this will be proposals to contracts. Okay, so now it's named, and then if you can guess, we need to transpose this. So we can switch the rows to columns and the columns to rows. Okay, cool. So now we have this. Looks a lot better. And let's call this stages. Stage, and then conversion rate. Oh no, let's call this conversion step, I guess. It doesn't really matter because we're going to hide this. Now, what we can do now is highlight just this, insert chart, and then let's do a bar chart, customize series, data labels, and now we have our conversion funnel conversion rates, right? Which is pretty cool. Funnel conversion percentage is what I called it. Funnel conversion percentage. Like I said earlier in this video, you can see quite clearly that your leads to inspections conversions are great. So you basically just need to have more, your leads to inspections are great. You basically need to have more leads, right? That's what you need to focus on in this particular case. And to get more leads, you probably need to have better quality pitches. So here I would focus heavily on trying to change up your pitches, because you know that everything from leads inspections down is pretty high. So you know where the drop off is happening here. Okay, so now that we have this, the next part of the dashboard that I want to show you guys is going to be a contracts leaderboard. I'm going to skip this, unfortunately. Like I said, it's quite complicated to do right now just on this video, but check out my advanced stuff, my advanced course, and I'll show you guys how to do this. This is a contracts leaderboard. This is basically just going to be a sum of all your contracts by salesperson within all these date ranges and filters, right? This one's really simple. You basically just go equals query, current period. I'm going to introduce you guys to the group by here. So select contracts, which is going to be sum of J. And then we're going to group this. Now group is the third one. If there's no where, it comes after select, right? Select J. I'm just going to group by, I need to make this A. Select and group by, okay, let me start this all over. So to do this query formula, go to the current period, highlight all the data that you want to reference. Now we want to view this by the sales rep, right? So we want to select the sales rep, which is going to be C, and then put a comma, and then we want the sum of J, right? So sum of J. Now you can't just close this out. You need to tell the formula that we want to group this by C. Basically, whatever is in select that is not an aggregate is like a sum, average, all that stuff, right? When we're using arithmetic on a number, anything that is not that, it's just like a regular field that there's no, sum or anything behind it. It needs to be in the group. So if you have, okay, so let me just show you guys. So this is what it looks like, right? Pretty cool. If I want to look at it by sales rep and location, so let's say one sales rep is in multiple locations, and I want to do sales rep and location, which is B, right? So I'm going to say select C and B, and then the sum, right? I have to group it by C, comma, B, like that. Now it's going to work, right? Now in this particular case, I don't need to, but I just want to show you guys that because that can be a bit confusing when you're starting this formula. Now, let's space this out again. Let's format this query formula. And let's add an order by, so I show the top, because the goal is to show the top 10. Okay, so order by is another syntax thing. Sum J, we're going to do it by descending order. Okay, so now it's going to order everything by sum J by descending order. This is probably the most advanced query formula I will be using in this video. And then we're going to label sum J just contracts, right? Now you see here it shows every single sales rep within this date range. When creating a chart, we don't want to show that many, right? It's not really going to show us that much data. So what we want to do is we want to limit, use the limit clause. Limit comes before label. Limit by 10. I can limit it by 1, by 2, whatever. I want to do 10. So this way it only shows the top 10, okay? Cool. So now that we have this here, sum J limit 10, I can just highlight these 10 rows and then insert, chart, customize, series, data labels. I'm going to say contracts leaderboard top 10. Now, when it comes to sorting, you have to use the order by clause in this. So I just covered this, right? But there are dynamic ways to kind of sort things to where you can add, certain buttons. Because look, like this isn't real. This is just projected from a formula, right? So I can't delete this or anything. You can't even sort it the normal way, which is using filters. Like this, it's just going to go back to where it was, okay? So that's the thing about the query formula is the formula is in one cell only. Everything else is like a projection, I guess. So yeah, I won't show you. There are ways to sort it though, just so you know, okay? Like where you can add like certain buttons and then the user can use that to sort. Like I said, I won't go over that in that video, but you get the basic idea. Okay, so now we have this part here. The last part is kind of just creating some tables for you guys to look at. If I go back to this dashboard here, I have a couple of tables where you can basically just see everyone, right? If you want like a deep dive into it. And then this is the conversion rates. So this one's really simple. It is basically, it's basically this formula here. Let's put this down here. But instead of just only selecting these metrics, we're going to select the person's name too, okay, which is a sales rep, which is column C. So we're going to select, just literally add a C to it, and then after the select, you want to add a group by C. That's it. And you'll see the data comes out like this. Just remove the transpose. Okay, so remove it up here and then remove the last parentheses because it doesn't need to be transposed. Okay, one thing, and then there's this empty row here, right? And the way that I get rid of it, because the reason why there's this empty row is because you're basically referencing A1 all the way down, right? So A1 to O, there's all these empty rows down here. Whoops. All these empty rows down here because we're going to the very bottom so that whenever new data comes in, it'll automatically be added in. What you have to do is tell the formula, only select the rows where, pick a column where you know there will always be data. In this case, you know, A will always have a date. So I'm going to put in a where clause where A is null. Is null is also like another just language syntax that you should just know. Oh, sorry, where A is not null, where A is not empty, okay? So now it looks like this, and then you can just highlight all the numbers. I would highlight all the numbers all the way down in case there's a lot more. Okay, you don't need this many rows. Okay, so you probably would only realistically have down to 100. So let's delete all this. And then let's highlight all of these numbers here, all the way down. Go to Format, Conditional Formatting, Color Scale, and then let's change this to the lowest number is red, highest number is green. And what this will do is it'll kind of give us a little more visual fun with this. Now the next part is going to be the conversion rates. Let's just copy this formula. And then let's just add this in here. Now we just need to select C, right, which is the sales rep name, and then group it by C. And then we just remove the transpose. And then you can add in the where. You pretty much know how to do that. I won't do that now. And then let's change this format. Change it all the way to the very, whoops. I gotta hate all these extra. So let's delete all of this. And then let's highlight all of here. All the way down, change the percent, change it to a percent, and then also change it to a color scale if you want. Cool. So now we have this good looking table over here. You can format it. Now you'll basically see this is basically the dashboard, right? It looks pretty good. You would just need to kind of change some formatting, and whenever data comes in, it'll automatically add it in. So this is a pretty great basic dashboard in my opinion from Google Forms. Whenever data comes in, it's automatically going to go into this form data, which will automatically feed into this filter data, and you have this, right? Now what's missing here is, you know, some of the stuff that I talked about, like some nice to haves, right? And then also maybe some trend lines, right? So, oh, there's one thing I forgot to show you guys is how to do the wins and losses, right? So this little section here, this is really easy. Just new tab here, equals query current data. You literally just go select whatever you want to show. So A, which is the date, C is the sales rep name, K is the wins, L is the challenges, just in commas. Nothing has to be aggregated, no sums, nothing. Maybe we make this a little bit wider, and then maybe we format wrap like this, right? And then we might want to up to row 1. So this will give you more context, like I said, right, into what you're looking at. So let's say we want to look at just say Harry Potter's over over like 1 week, right? January 13th to January 16th. Now you can see here, it only shows the wins and losses, the wins and challenges of that period for Harry Potter. Now, some nice to haves that I didn't go over is how to, it's kind of annoying to have to click through this every single time and select the date range when you probably just want to be able to click like a menu option to say the last week, Monday through Sunday, or last week, Sunday through Saturday, or the last 30 days, or the last, last month, this year date. You want to have these default selections, right? So that stuff I'm going to go over in the advanced course. You guys can go through it in the video description. So, that stuff would be nice to have. These dynamic drop downs where when you select one location, it only shows a sales rep as in those locations as options. And then lastly, importantly, maybe some trend lines, right? Maybe you want to see how this is trending on a week by week basis, on a month by month basis, even on a daily basis, but more likely a weekly basis. I've seen like most of my clients, they have weekly sales team meetings and they want to check on this stuff, right? So this stuff I'll go over like in the advanced course, but this is a pretty great way, I think, to get started and build like your first sales team KPI dashboard. If you guys have any questions or comments, and you guys just leave it in a comment below, and then I'll do my best to answer them. Any other videos you guys might want to see, just kind of comment that below as well. Besides that, you guys can just click on the link and you guys can download most of this exact sheet where you guys can have some of the complicated formulas to just save and then work through it that way as well. There's going to be some other like premium options, I guess, that you guys can look at. Just check that out, and then make sure to like and subscribe if you guys want to see more video tutorials like this. Thanks a lot, guys.